There's one game that I've wanted to talk about on this channel for quite a bit now, and that game is none other than Final Fantasy XIII. This is one of the first games that I got on the Xbox 360 when I got my console, and to me this is one of the most misunderstood and just overlooked Final Fantasy games in the entire series, and really just one of the most misunderstood JRPGs in general also, in my opinion. I think Lightning is one of the most misunderstood characters in the Final Fantasy series, and especially amongst any of the mainline protagonists. And I think, there's a lot of people at the time that even still I see saying it also, but back then, would say that she was very cold and they weren't a fan of her. But I think when you have a soldier like her going through trauma, it's very understandable as to why she was the way she was. And honestly, Sazh is such a likable character because he's probably, for me, in the top 3 of all Final Fantasy characters in terms of just being the most human characters that have been written by Square Enix for the series, or just Square in general, before they had the merger. And for me, him and Vivi are two of the characters that I look at as being the most human, of anybody in the series. Well, there were a lot of people online that found the l'Cie terminology confusing, and you saw a lot of complaints about that online, I remember at the time. The emotional stakes of Sazh trying to save his son and Lightning trying to save her sister were very grounded. And if you can really feel the performance, which I think, the performances by the voice actors in this game were great, then does the terminology and, things like that really even matter to an extent? And in a world where there's such open world fatigue with a lot of these games, one of the biggest examples was I saw a post, whether it was real or not, about, someone talking about the next 3D Zelda being confirmed to be an open world game. And I saw the comments were not happy with that. And I think that kind of shows that a game like Final Fantasy XIII that has such linearity really would be appreciated in today's day and age, especially if it got remade. Back in 2009, the word hallway was a death sentence for an RPG. Critics tore Final Fantasy XIII apart because you couldn't veer off the path. But standing here in 2026, I honestly gotta say, I think a lot of people are tired of cleaning maps in these games. We spent the last decade in map clearing simulators, climbing towers to reveal icons just to clear a checklist. In that context, Final Fantasy XIII doesn't feel restrictive, it feels intentional. Every frame of this quote-unquote hallway is a 10 out of 10 visual powerhouse. Because the developers knew exactly where your eyes would be, they could push the lighting and composition to a level that most open world games still can't touch. It's not a corridor, it's a 40-hour cinematic sequence. From a directorial standpoint, Final Fantasy XIII has a very interesting direction problem. The game looks like $1 trillion, but it does forget to talk to you. This is where the infamous datalog of the game comes in. Instead of showing us the weight of being a l'Cie through world building or NPCs, the game expects you to pause the action and read a textbook. It's a classic show, don't tell failure. The world was clearly too beautiful, too museum-like, to stop for a conversation with a shopkeeper. It's a game that's focused so much on being a movie that it forgets to let the world breathe, forcing the lore into menus instead of into the script. The biggest meme about this game is that you just press X to win, but if you actually play the high-level content of this game, then you realize it's just a total misconception and misunderstanding of the mechanic system. You aren't a soldier in Final Fantasy XIII, you're the conductor. You aren't micromanaging every single swing of a sword, you're managing the paradigm shift. It's about the macro, not the micro. If your timing is off by 2 seconds on a shift, your party wipes. It's a rhythmic, high-stakes strategy system that rewards foresight over reflexes, and honestly, it's one of the most satisfying battle systems that Square has ever built once it finally takes the training wheels off. Then there's Hope Estheim. For years, he was the poster child for quote-unquote annoying JRPG kids. But I think if you take a look at him now, and I think for a lot of people who are young and grew up with this game and maybe are a bit more mature, you can understand that you were just looking at a kid that was going through realistic grief. Hope is a 14-year-old who watched his mother die in front of him, and he was then branded a pulse demon by the state. He should be whiny, he should be angry, and he should be irrational. In 2026, we've seen enough stoic protagonists to appreciate a character who actually reacts to trauma like a human being. His growth from a terrified kid to a leader is one of the best arcs in the trilogy, and it's time we give that performance the credit that it deserves. So what about that 2024 tease by Square Enix for a remake of this game? If you don't remember or you didn't see it on Twitter when Square Enix was responding to a fan, close to 2 years ago now, they were saying that, hey, why wouldn't we just settle for a remaster of this game rather than a full-on remake? And honestly, I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure it was just some Square, intern or young, person who was managing their Twitter account. But if we did get a remake of the whole trilogy, I would be, so happy if we got Final Fantasy XIII 1, Final Fantasy XIII 2, and then Lightning Returns. but of course they would need to start with 13 and just see how maybe the reception is. But I would be thrilled if we got any remake, from this trilogy of games, as I loved all 3 games. And I will say, with the power of the Switch 2 and something like even the PS5 Pro, and maybe even these future consoles that we get like the PS6 and the Xbox Project Helix, and whatever we see with the end of the Switch 2's lifespan, and maybe even a Switch revision or Switch 3, I think that Square has the chance to maybe fix the flaws of this 2009 classic, in my opinion. Imagine the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth treatment to this game, though, without the quote-unquote Vaseline visuals that we got when that game first launched on the PS5, 2 years ago now. We don't need a total overhaul of this game, though. Just imagine this with pseudo-open areas. Expanding those lush corridors into an area where you could explore a town on Cocoon would be beautiful, and would just really feel like the game is more opened up. And also, most importantly for a remake, there's the integrated lore. Square could use modern gameplay techniques to really explain the fal'Cie through gameplay. If you give us the synergy and the switching of the 2 recent Final Fantasy VII Remake games, that could really work to spice up the paradigm system. If Square plays their cards right with a Final Fantasy XIII Remake, it wouldn't just be a second chance, it would be a full-on redemption for this game that could possibly lead to remakes for the entire trilogy. And honestly, I think it's exactly what we need right now. While of course I don't think we would get this before we get the 3rd entry in the Final Fantasy VII Remake series, I think Square being able to remake both this game as well as Final Fantasy IX would be brilliant, and it would be 2 of my favorite things that they could do at the time. Of course I'm excited for the next entry in the Final Fantasy mainline series with Final Fantasy XVII, but remaking both 9 and 13 is like at the top of my list right now in terms of things I want out of Square. And I would like to know down below if you would like to see Final Fantasy XIII remade. Would you like the whole trilogy remade, or were you just not a fan of the game, and tell me why that is. If you did like the video though, then I would really appreciate if you give it a like. And like I said, if you have anything to say about Final Fantasy XIII, or even me talking about 9 getting remade, definitely let me know in the comments though. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed this video and just some of my other content, then please hit that subscribe button, as I have a lot of fun content coming up in terms of JRPGs and other news and gaming stuff. Thank you all so much for watching though, and I am out. Peace.